Hi, I'm Body Painter Rich, and this is some of my work. I'm coming to you from the Art Shack. It's a little trailer in the backyard that I use for creative purposes, and this is probably where I'll be making most of my videos if I'm not actively demonstrating on a model. There's 4 basic types of airbrush: top or gravity feed, bottom or siphon feed, side feed, and air guns. Somewhere in those 4 is what you need to make your art. Gravity feed airbrushes may or may not have a cup on top. Sometimes they have just a little notch taken out of the top of the airbrush, and you basically drop your makeup or paint into the top of the airbrush and let gravity do the work for you. The air then sprays it out the front end. These are great for details. They don't use much pressure, so they're wonderful for use around the eyes, around the nose. They can be used for basic foundation as well, but they are a little small to use for body paint work or other larger applications. But they are excellent for cosmetic use, and if you're a traditional cosmetic artist, that's probably where you want to start, is a good gravity feed airbrush. Now, a bottom or siphon feed airbrush uses a bottle underneath the airbrush to hold the medium, whether it's makeup or paint or what have you. Uses the air pressure to draw that medium up the siphon tube and spray it out the front. This is great because you can hold a lot more medium under it rather than the little tiny color cup. But it does need more pressure to work, so it's not as good for around the eyes or right under the nostrils, but it's great for whole body painting, crazy face painting, foundations, things where you're using more makeup and don't need quite the detail, don't have to be quite as close or as sensitive. The top feed airbrushes I mentioned, those can go down to like 8 or 10 psi and still spray relatively well. A siphon feed airbrush, you're probably needing at least 12 to 18 psi to make it work well. Even up to 20 is not uncommon. So you need to be a little more careful, but it works well. Also, you can keep a bunch of siphon feed airbrushes or a bunch of bottles. Makes it easier to switch your colors out. You don't have to clean it each time between use. Then there's the side feed airbrush. I would not bother with these if I were you. They are basically a hybrid between a top feed and a bottom feed. Makes sense, it's right there in the middle. But they don't do either job as well. Basically you get kind of the advantages of both, but the disadvantages of both. And frankly, I think you're better off spending $100 extra to get one of each. That way you've got the benefits of both, and you end up with a backup airbrush in your hand, so when one goes wrong, you've got another one to work, because believe me, eventually it'll go wrong. The last airbrush I'm going to talk about is the touch-up gun or air gun. It's kind of the big brother of the airbrush. It's not really for you beginners, it's more for folks who are doing this for a living. It's great for covering whole bodies or other large areas fast. If you're trying to paint one design across multiple backs, it's also real handy. Now, a lot of people get confused between the single or dual, otherwise known as the double action airbrush. Single action airbrush basically means you push your finger up and down, and that makes the air go on and off, and the needle inside is set to a pre-set place, and it's basically a glorified spray can. A double action airbrush refers to the 2 actions you use to use it: pushing down for the air and pulling back on your finger to adjust the flow of the medium or the makeup. Now, I would strongly recommend that you buy a dual or double action airbrush if you're getting into this business. Frankly, you're going to get more control. It does take a little longer to learn, but you can do anything from a pencil thin line to an 1.5 to 2 inch thick spray. You can write with it. You can do all sorts of special effects. It takes time to learn. I know you got to be patient, but it's totally worth the learning. Most of the special effects you see on my work and on other work, well, just about anywhere, will be using a double action airbrush. So that's what I think you should use. So I guess we're getting down to what the recommendations are. Personally, these are what I would recommend. If you are a traditional makeup artist, you're looking to do foundation, blush, eyeshadow, etc., I would suggest you start with a top feed airbrush and 1 bottom feed airbrush. 1 of each, basically. You're going to spend a little more money, but you're going to have both the tools. The other thing is, if your bottom feed airbrush doesn't work, you got the top feed as backup. If your top feed airbrush isn't working, you could probably get by with a color cup attached to the bottom feed airbrush. Either way, you're covered, but you've got both tools that are ideal for either job, so you're good to go. Now, if you are a traditional makeup artist and you've mastered the basics, you want to really get a full kit, I would work towards getting at least 2 to 3 top feed airbrushes and 2 to 3 bottom feed airbrushes. It's always good to have a backup. You don't want to be at a job, have your airbrush messing up or a part get bent, and you've got to sit there fiddling with it. Instead, you put it aside, you put on a new airbrush, you do the job, and then you can fiddle with it and fix it while your talent's on stage or whatever, instead of wasting time for your clients fixing airbrushes. Now, for body paint artists, I would recommend something different. For body paint artists, I wouldn't bother with the top feed right away. Start with 2 or 3 good bottom feed airbrushes. Later on, I would work to getting 6 or 8 bottom feed airbrushes and maybe a top feed airbrush or 2 and a touch-up air gun as well. Basically, if you have a variety of bottom feed airbrushes, you can set up your bottles ahead of time and be able to swap them out without wasting makeup while you change colors. You simply have an array of them set up and you go with that. I'll probably display my setup on a later video to give you an idea of how I do it, but that is what I'd recommend. Now, as far as brands go, there's a lot of different ones out there. Avoid anything that is branded with a makeup company. At least in my experience, most of the brands that are put out by makeup companies or by airbrush retailers are actually knockoff models that are made in Korea, and probably not the best sort of thing you want to use. The brands I really like are Iwata. I think they make a good product, and they're well known throughout the airbrush industry, not just cosmetics. Also, Grex airbrushes. I've had the opportunity to try those out. They're wonderfully designed, beautifully machined. They are a bit expensive, but if you have the extra cash, they would not be a bad investment. I've heard good things about Pache and Rich Pen airbrushes and DeVilbiss. I've not owned any of them myself, but they're reliable companies. I've tried a couple other brands that I was a little disappointed with. Badger, I haven't had good luck with. I don't feel they were machined real well or built very robustly. Peak airbrushes are basically one of those knockoffs I was telling you about. They look like they're an exact replica of the Iwata, but again, the machining's not quite as good. The trigger is not quite as smooth. And the Thayer and Chandler airbrushes used to be really good, but in the last few years they just don't seem to be making them the same. And I would say if you've looked at the Aztec plastic airbrushes, avoid them at all costs. I've had nothing but trouble with those. Now, if you want to disagree with me, leave a comment, let me know. I have had no luck with Aztec. I destroyed mine within a day or two and was not at all happy with the whole cleaning mechanism. Anyways, I hope that's helped. You're welcome to look at my website, secondskinimages.com, if you would like to ask more questions. You can also find me at the Stylist Forum on modelmayhem.com. And, well, that's about it. Feel free to ask questions below, down in the comment area. Feel free to go to modelmayhem.com and ask me questions there, or whatever, and hopefully if I get some good questions I will actually answer them in video, possibly give you some demos as well, and see what's happening. I would love to know what you guys need to know, and hopefully I can help you to learn more. Great. See you next time.